Welcome to the Investment Banking Leaders Podcast, the only podcast dedicated to helping the investment banking community grow through learning from other successful leaders. So whether you're interested in learning about investment banking, an analyst or associate looking for advice on career progression and succeeding, or a VP or a senior that's passionate about leadership, you'll take something away from each and every episode. My name is Pete Nieberg, Global Head at Altrum, and my mission is to connect as many of you with successful investment banking leaders as possible. So thanks for joining me and enjoy today's episode. I'm really excited to introduce today's guest to you all, Scott Wieler, the chairman of DC Advisory in Washington. Scott started his career at Bankers Trust Company before leading Alex. Brown and Sons, premier media and communications practice on Wall Street in the 90s. Scott then co-headed the media and telecom IB business at Deutsche Bank, where he led the team through an exciting growth period across 20 years, before founding Signal Hill in 2002. Scott and the team built it into a leading investment banking and advisory boutique, which served M&A and private capital raising needs for growth companies in the TMT space. And in 2016, testament to this success, Signal Hill was named Boutique Technology Investment Bank of the Year by Global M&A Network. 2 years later, 2018, Signal Hill was acquired by Daiwa. For those listening who don't know, that's DC Advisory's parent company. And at that point, Scott took on the role of CEO at DC Advisory, where his 35 years plus experience, his deep understanding of investment banking, M&A, corporate restructurings has been invaluable for the firm's continued development and progress. Scott currently holds the position of chairman at DC Advisory, where he continues to provide value, advice, support and leadership. And if that wasn't enough, Scott also serves as a trustee for the Sheridan Foundation and the Committee for Economic Development. He's passionate about helping others and helping you listening today grow in the investment banking industry and develop your skills. And on a personal note, I'm really looking forward to hearing his many insights given his success and longevity in the industry. So welcome to the Investment Banking Leaders Podcast, Scott, and thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. So why don't we start, Scott, with you introducing DC Advisory to the listeners and what you do for your clients.
So, I think it's pretty straightforward in the M&A boutique advisory business. Our mission, kind of the why, kind of if you think about it relative to TED Talks, is we're in the dreams business. We help our clients fulfill their dreams. Whether that's entrepreneurs or directors or shareholders, all have, kind of interesting approaches and thoughts, kind of about the business. Our job is to listen, is to assess, is to benchmark, and then customize advice to try and help those clients achieve those goals. We talk about the right advice. We talk about giving advice sometimes that people don't want to hear, but it is the right advice based on our experience and judgment, and that should be a constant, kind of always. So, I think that's a little bit of kind of what it is we do. Unlike consultants, we're there to see the results. And that's the exciting part of living and growing with, kind of growth companies that we serve oftentimes multiple times, kind of in their evolution in life.
I love that. Strong start, dream makers. I think that's a great way to kick off today's session.
It certainly gives people a reason for wanting to go to work every day because the clients are constantly changing. The learning experience is there and real. And, kind of that's what keeps us, kind of doing this as long as we do.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. Turning up, it helps if you're dialed into that. And what better way to kick off today's session. So I'm always interested, speaking to bankers in the industry, long-term, successful bankers. How did you end up in investment banking?
So it could have been I was a grocery store manager and had never gone to college.
Okay.
I wasn't a great, kind of student, kind of when I was in high school, and had to be encouraged and cajoled to go. to college. And, kind of when I was there, I reconnected with a series, kind of friends. And quite frankly, networks and experiences around networks influence you and what it is you want to do. And so I had a very dear friend who graduated from Harvard, where there was no limit to what it is you could do, kind of and aspire to do. And in my case, the entry for someone coming from Boston College was going through a traditional commercial bank training program, because that's the way you ended up on Wall Street, and then navigating and transitioning over time, kind of to banking. I would say that there were two, when I finished business school, there were two jobs that everyone wanted. Everyone wanted an investment banking job in M&A because it was hot as a pistol, or they wanted to be assistant to the CEO of some company. I didn't have enough of a pedigree to be able to get the second. And candidly, I already had the first job that most people coming out of business school were looking to do, an M&A job. And so my approach was to continue to specialize and go deeper, kind of in the category.
Love it. And it helps to have a good network and be influenced by good friends. And we're definitely going to touch on that as we do in every episode of the podcast. Before we jump into the real meat of the conversation today, tell us something that is unexpected or unknown about you.
I was dirt poor graduating from college. I couldn't rub two nickels together.
Wow.
Being able to go to New York, I struggled to pay rent. There weren't all of these approaches to pay for and ease transition of college graduates into those roles. And so I'm not going to say that I stole, but I begged. And what's amazing is the trajectory and growth and opportunity afforded was such that was totally different in 5 years. And there's nothing that I can say, kind of other than that.
Nice. Well, good story again, and certainly led to a lot of success over a long period. Why don't we talk a little bit about success in the industry? What do you attribute to your success in investment banking?
So I guess I would say two things. The first is mentorship, and the second is luck. In the context of mentorship, it's about someone seeing you, identifying you, giving you an opportunity to show what you're truly capable of, and then continuing to, kind of power you along. Kind of in the case of, kind of luck, it's finding that mentor. It's finding, kind of a passion. And then ultimately, like everything else, it's outworking others to, kind of actualize, kind of and succeed.
Amazing. And mentorship, as I said, it does come up. So coming up as one of the early things that you attribute to your success. For those looking to find a mentor, maybe newer to the industry and maybe struggling with that, how to go about that, any advice for them on how to find a great mentor?
It's interesting. You don't, one, I think everyone needs to network, kind of up and down, kind of in the ordinary course. And that really needs to be a discipline and skill. And quite frankly, it wasn't one of my disciplines and skills, kind of growing up. But, I think about mentors that I had, kind of at different points, kind of in my life. They weren't my boss, right? It was never my boss. It was one or two steps, kind of above that my boss gave me an opportunity to engage with, kind of, or listen to, or experience, kind of in the context, kind of transactions. And again, it's sort of random. It's almost happenstance. You can't force it, but it actually becomes a natural bond, and you see it, kind of when it works. And so I think this is a little bit of where we always say teams win and individuals lose.
Right.
Being part of a team gives you exposure to those people that can demonstrably impact your career trajectory and your opportunity set. And that's what you want. You just want the opportunity to show what it is you can do.
Definitely. And I've heard from other leaders on the podcast about if you're curious, you take an interest, you ask questions, you're keen, then this leads to more opportunities along the lines of what you've talked about and introductions to others as well. So,
and the luck piece, it's the accelerant, kind of to your career, to your opportunity, to options, kind of for you. But ultimately, what I would say in all of this is you do well when you become an expert at something and really use that to the best of your abilities, to impact situations and relationships.
Sure, that makes sense. And so you talked about network. It needs to be a discipline, a skill, something that you had to learn. I hear a lot from other leaders on the podcast that they wish they'd started sooner in their careers and not later. Talk to us about advice you'd give for those, again, more junior in the industry who want to network more or want to become better in that area.
Well, so let's start with the basics, and that is everyone in this job is smart, right? So that's just a check the box, kind of exercise. Everyone can learn disciplines, economics, kind of technical aspects, kind of to this. But what they can't do unless they're wired this way is listen intently, be a sponge, be tenacious, kind of in what it is, kind of you're doing. When you're asked to do a task, go beyond the simple and try and see if you can push yourself and go further, kind of, and really begin to add insight, kind of, in value. And then last but not least, I would just say fundamental to success is curiosity. If you're not intellectually curious and trying to understand and go beyond whatever the fact pattern is, you're never going to be really successful, in my humble opinion. You can be successful at individual jobs. You can't learn to pivot and change the way you use your skill sets over time.
Great advice. Really, really love that. So again, listening intently, being the sponge, being tenacious, going beyond, pushing yourself, and curiosity. All great points there. Are these skills or characteristics that you look for as part of the interview process, recruitment process in teams you've built or with the teams that you're now responsible for?
Yes. So Jack Welch used to talk about, kind of wanting to hire people that were that had a chip on their shoulder. And what I took away from that was not that per se. It's this notion of you get what you pay for. If you put in the effort with all of those other preconditions of being smart, kind of tenacious, etc., you really won't be disappointed because of, kind of the level of effort, kind of here. This goes back to my comment. I was always feeling intellectually inferior, kind of to the teams around me because they were all so well pedigreed. But at the end of the day, I thought if I could work harder and that was in my control, I could do, kind of whatever.
Sure.
And then luck was the accelerant, right? Kind of it was that thing that when it happened, you just had to take advantage of it and allow it to play out, kind of naturally. And quite frankly, when you're observed, it's amazing how you become the go-to person that certain senior people always want to use, and that becomes your experience engine. That becomes your judgment bank for later, kind of in life as you, kind of evolve. So, everyone thinks that there's just a path that it's well worn, that everyone understands exactly what it is. And it isn't. It's random, right? It is entirely based on you connect with someone and they give you an opportunity. And you just have to appreciate that and make sure you take advantage of every opportunity.
Love it. And winning, Jack Welch, I think I know that one well as well. So again, great feedback, great advice there. Talking a bit about successful deals. You've closed many in your career. What are the key ingredients to successful deal making, in your opinion?
So it's interesting. I tried to think about that a little bit before, kind of this call. And at the end of to me, the start and end was client satisfaction, really understanding what they were trying to accomplish and working backwards from that in the context of almost every transaction. Kind of, did it make sense? Did it work, kind of against those, kind of objectives? And I think the ultimate test, kind of a banker, kind of in this environment or in any environment, is clients wanting to do repeat business with you. So I have one thread through 30 years of my career, which was a client very early on. I wasn't the lead person. I was the number 2 person. I was the one supposed to make, the number 1 person look really smart and come up with the idea, kind of, or whatever. And we did, and this goes back, believe it or not, this is 1985. We did something radical that no one had ever done. And it was an idea that I had, which was a recapitalization of a public company, not by using leverage, but by spinning off the biggest business that they had to their shareholders. Now you think about that and it was like, well, why would you do that? Well, the biggest business that they had wasn't being properly recognized in the market because this company made 25 other acquisitions of businesses that were failures. And they needed to do something about it. And so the idea was fix, fold, or sell. Distribute the meaningful asset to the public shareholders such that they could continue to own what they really wanted to own, and then turn around and figure out what you had from a portfolio perspective that was worthwhile. Well, we ended up selling everything. We did the spinoff, and then we went from $1 billion business to a $100 million business overnight. Most CEOs would say that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. But the fact of the matter is, because of the spinoff, we were able to give the management team a big equity stake in the business and in the success of making these other things worthwhile. Well, we turned around and sold them all, such that we almost became an investment company. And then we turned around and did 40 acquisitions thereafter. I've never had a situation before that where essentially we were their trusted advisor. Everything came to us first. And so I would say that's a thread in the overall narrative of we always want client satisfaction. And the ultimate test is, will they use us again? And if they use us as their outsourced advisor, that means you've really accomplished trusted advisor status, which is the most important thing in our business, right? So this fellow, one, he became my client, which was sort of funny because he wasn't. 2, he was a client, he was a mentor, and he traveled with me everywhere, and probably became my closest advisor and became a board member. And so never would have guessed that trajectory or transition, but, kind of interesting. And that's one thread. There are a series. But that gives you an idea.
That's a really great story, and it definitely helps me connect with how you build it, the idea, and then that long-term relationship to become a trusted partner, really, amazing. And what about when you're looking at client satisfaction and you're looking at it, again, from an analyst and associate and VP perspective, what advice would you give them to help them reach that client satisfaction level that's required to turn the business into a trusted advisor?
So again, everyone, kind of on teams has a role. I would ask them all to try and play up to the next role, kind of as part of what it is they do. And what I mean by that is, if you're an analyst, there are essential analytics and technical work that has to be done, research work that has to be done. Great, do it. Now with it, ask yourself the question, what does it mean? How should you interpret it? How will your boss interpret it? And then how will it be presented to a client? And try and anticipate, right? And at every step of the way, if you can take the data and the analytics to the next level, you're in a position to really not just do the job, but add value. And that's what I think what, kind of everyone needs to think about. By the same token, we try and have all of our analysts be able to be part of presentations. What are you going to say about the work that you just did? Are you going to wait for me to tell you what to say? Or are you going to be able to develop, kind of the points that you need to? Or do you need to watch once or twice first before you try and figure out how to do it? Whatever the approach is, try and play up and be visible. For associates and VPs, it's the same thing. You need to have a role. You need to be visible. You need to be thought of as part of the team because you are largely embedded in the client at different points in time throughout the process. They are turning to you, even though you're 25 or 30, they're turning to you for your advice, whether it's organizing data or data rooms or telling a story and developing the data to support the story. Where is it going? Again, it's this notion of how do you anticipate and work backwards. The VP MD transition or the VP Director MD transition, that's the hardest. It has always been the hardest because you're moving from a support execution role where you need to know all of the data and how to use it, but you're trying to become the client-facing person. And there's a huge difference from doing the work and leading presentations to being the outward-facing client person, proactive marketer. It's an entirely different discipline set. But the one thing that's constant is the ability to use your cumulative experience to tell stories by analogy. Because at the end of the day, we're all storytellers, right? We have to use that cumulative set of experiences to provide our judgment filter for what someone should do. And so what I say to the VP, you can't make that jump until you really reflect on the set of experiences that you've had to develop your judgment bank. Because at the end of the day, that's what clients are going to be reliant on.
Yep.
And my last bit is, so many people feel like they have to do it themselves. And I go back to teams win and individuals lose. This notion that you have to conquer it, you have to figure it out, you have to skin it, you have to eat it, stop. You're part of a team, you're part of a firm, you can draw on resources, you don't need all of the answers. But you need to know when you need help to break through. And everyone needs it. And they shouldn't be bashful about asking for it. Because quite frankly, that's the part where mentorship is the most exciting for the senior person. Because they're actually watching and seeing that younger person actualize before their eyes. And that's where they can coach, right? And help people through, well, how did they do it? And it's almost impossible to say how you did it unless you tell a story. What was that breakthrough experience for you? And how did it work? And what did the senior person allow you to do? And how was the client reacting? Because the clients generally just listen. So I don't know if that helps, but and that may have been a bit of a ramble, but it is. It's interesting. It's about a series of pivots. And those pivots are well worn, but the hardest one is to go from I'm a support person and an execution person to I'm a proactive marketer, because it really requires outbound personality, which hasn't necessarily been flexed in that early development, kind of your career.
Love that. And loads of good stuff in there. I mean, picking up on, you said for those in analyst associates, anticipate, play up, be visible, know the why behind what you're doing. And it's interesting, you say the VP to the MD, and I get that. I've heard analyst to associate because of the jump to having to manage others. But I agree that step out into the client-facing role to really be that marketer is key.
So let me just jump in, because you're leading the witness, and it's good for everyone. Every step of the way, there is a challenge in getting people to stop doing all the things that they had done, and try and figure out how to guide and lead teams in different ways. But for that associate that isn't data-driven and can't do the work that an analyst can do, they'll be limited in the respect that they get from that team. And so we try and tell folks, please don't take this the wrong way. You're going to do what an analyst would do for the first 6 months of your life. You're not going to worry about having an analyst on the team. You need to conquer it, because that's the only way you can guide and teach others to do it. And it's the only way you can find the mistakes. And oh, and by the way, finding mistakes is a big deal. So every step of the way, it's a variation of that. And it gets harder because, as you know, as you go up, it's just so much faster to do it yourself. But it defeats the purpose of you stepping into that next role and building the team.
Yeah, and building the team to the right level. And you've touched on teams so much, it's obvious that it's a big part in your career and obviously at DC as well, to have that strong team. You touched on storytelling, knowledge bank, judgment bank, I think you used was the term. What else outside of that to take that step from VP to MD successfully? What advice do you have for those VPs looking to make that step soon? Other things that they can do to make that transition easier?
So again, part of it is networking. At this point, it's not exactly about developing mentors, although a little bit. It's about trying to harness, my words, the best team to work on a project and complement you for missing elements. So everyone has a role to play, kind of in almost any, kind of situation. And for a director or a VP making that transition, knowing their strengths, knowing their weaknesses, knowing that they need to work harder on the weaknesses than the strengths, allows them to think about how to assemble a team or ask advice on how to assemble, kind of a team that's appropriate. 1. 2, kind of in the bake-off, bringing in, kind of a vice chairman or someone senior that isn't going to do it, kind of on a day-to-day basis. That's not their role. It's actually to help convince the client that they're confident in your capabilities, kind of as a younger, growing, aspiring, kind of person, and that they'll be around it, kind of as needed, kind of to watch and to supervise and provide some coaching guidance to the quarterback on the team, right? And so it's that kind of thing that I think people need to do and use.
I haven't heard that before, so I love that, like bringing in the chairman and vice chairman, using the advice, but also a show of confidence to help make the transitions happen. So I love that. Really good insight.
Well, think about a young person up and coming, trying to make, by the way, everyone needs a bit of humility, kind of in this business. I would suggest we need a lot more humility than we actually have. But it's very hard for a young person to beat their chest and suggest they're really great, kind of at something. But it's really easy for a senior person to say, I've watched this person, I've observed them, I've worked with them, and they're really the real deal. And what they don't have, we have as a firm. And we'll help them, kind of get to that, kind of next level. And that's what clients want. They want to hire, truth be told, they want to hire someone who's passionate about their business, insightful about it because of deep domain, kind of expertise, and then can draw the relevant resources from the firm to deliver for them. So they hire the team leader and the firm. They don't hire an individual. Or if they do, they're going to be rapidly disappointed.
Love it. Be passionate, insightful. They want the expertise, and they want to know you can draw the resources. It's a team game. So I love it. Again, really nice way to put it, I think, to round it. So I hope everyone's listening to that. Let's talk a little bit about CEOs. Can you tell me what you feel are the biggest challenges facing investment banking CEOs at the moment?
I guess I would say there clearly are two. Kind of the first is the war for talent. The competition is everywhere all the time. And it has radically changed over my career. When I started the pinnacle job was either consulting or investment banking. That's where 80% of everyone went out of business school, period. Well, that's not the case anymore. And the number one job is still consulting. I think investment banking is 4 or 5 now, kind of in terms of, kind of entry. So, and why is that? Private equity. Private equity is a place that many people want to go for a variety of reasons. They believe it's the best wealth creation opportunity, kind of for them. Whether that's true or not doesn't really matter. All of the training and development that we do for folks at bankers is directly applicable to what it is they would do at private equity, and I think that's the reason why. In the old days, it was commercial banking into investment banking. Now I think it's investment banking into private equity, kind of in terms of, kind of career shifts. So the war for talent, it's about recruiting, it's about compensation, kind of and rewards, kind of around retention. It's around recognition. It also is changing the way we think about, kind of our populations. 40 years ago, it was an incredibly homogeneous group of folks. They all came from 10 business schools, 10-ish colleges, and they all looked and sounded the same. Well, that's flawed, kind of in a world where you want, my words, diversity of thought and experience. By the way, I was diversity, kind of at the time being a poor guy. So I had economic diversity and I probably had experiential diversity. And all of those things I think are necessary for a firm like ours or any firm to be able to deliver to a client a team that looks and sounds and feels like them. Diversity of thought and experience is really important. That doesn't mean you're always going to get the right answers, and it doesn't mean the right answer always comes from the diverse person, but you have to listen. Everyone has a voice, and oftentimes the least experienced voice is the one that's going to tell you something that you haven't thought of. And back to anticipation and understanding how people would react, that is really valuable. So now, if you think about it, we get, our entry class, kind of in the U.S. in any given year is, 30 folks. We get 10,000 resumes. We're now using AI to sort through and try and evaluate that in terms of a filter. But one of the challenges to filters is, by definition, you're creating biases. So relative to diversity, you have to think about and really make sure that the biases that you have are what you want and that you filter out others that are not helpful to you. And so it's very interesting, kind of in terms of how that's all working. Then you have an ability to do these kinds of video chats, kind of with folks, or you might ask people to send a video clip of them. Why are they interested in the firm? And on that resume, kind of an AI, you decide who you're going to interview and how many you're going to do it. But 10,000 people down to what? To get to what? Especially if you want a diverse, kind of group. So in the first instance, kind of a war for talent. And it's constant because we generally don't have people leave to go to other investment banks. We have people go to venture. We have people go to our clients. We have people go to private equity. It's just an entrepreneurial class of folks that we attract because of the nature of our clients and that they feel they need to pursue. But by the way, that doesn't mean we don't get them back at a later date after they've experimented and done that a bit. So war for talent, number, kind of one. I'd say number two, everyone believes because we've done something successful for a client, we own them. And that couldn't be further from the truth. This whole notion, client loyalty in its purest sense, went away 40 years ago when Salomon Brothers started doing bond financings for every major corporate that they weren't, their traditional bank for. So we have to earn the right every day. And that requires a level of connectivity and touch and constant engagement that purely transactional people are not used to doing, right? It's like hard. But you've earned the right to have a privileged seat, but you need to continue to earn it and not forget that client loyalty is earned. And I would end on that client loyalty piece in a funny way. What I've learned, the most powerful advice a banker can give a client is not to do something. Everyone in our business is geared up. How do we get it done? What do you need to pay? How do we structure it? How do we reduce the risk? Well, how do we? There are some really bad deals there that the client, for whatever reason, may be enamored by. But the right advice is to tell them it's not going to work, or it's bad timing, or whatever it is. They're not getting the product. They're not getting the distribution. They're not getting the market entry. They're not getting the management. Whatever it is. And what I can tell you is clients remember almost forever when you told them not to do something. They don't remember forever when you told them to do something, right? And so it's an interesting observation, I think.
That's great. So thanks for sharing that. And I think that little antidote helps, powerful advice not to do something. And they do remember it, as you say. And I think that's in lots of different walks. So thanks for sharing that. And war on talent, again, I've heard others speaking about it, and with tech and PE, as you say, amongst other things, it's always something you've got to keep your eye on and keep evolving to keep your best talent, right? So thanks for sharing that.
Just as an example, if private equity is number one, or consulting is number one, and private equity is number two, number three now is tech. And out of business schools. And it's fascinating because the old Procter & Gamble brand manager coming out of Harvard to run a small business. Everyone's taught to be a general manager. What's your go-to-market? How does it work? Et cetera. Now that brand manager isn't it a product, it's at a technology firm, right? That is perceived as that next step. And that's Apple, that's Amazon, that's Google. That's everyone hiring to put themselves in a position almost like the assistant to the CEO. But this is, I'm going to run a small business.
Yeah. You started moving into culture, so it's a nice segue. What culture have you built at DC, and how did you go about it?
I guess in the first instance, I do the DEI or ESG, kind of speech around everyone has a voice. Everyone within the firm, but especially the senior people. Second, transparency. There should be no black box around how people get compensated. There should be this notion of fairness always. Transparency in compensation, transparency, kind of in promotion, kind of a meritocracy, pure and simple. And quite frankly, we only want to hire on the outside when we don't have the capability on the inside and we can't grow it. And so we're big believers in developing our own talent, and growing it into forward-facing, kind of bankers. And we've got plenty of, kind of examples of that. Not enough, but we do have, kind of real examples. So then the culture, we sort of have broken it down into, we want everyone to think about sort of four things. The first is communication. For everyone, kind of within the firm, it's about over-communicating, kind of with team, with partners, with colleagues in other markets, but it's this notion of being front and center, being visible and communicating, not just internally, but externally. Second, this whole notion of collaboration. Teams win. Individuals lose. You need to partner, you need to support, you need to make sure we flood the zone, kind of with talent for clients so they know they're special and they'll get whatever resource they need. And then we need to kind of step back and think about who really needs to do it, kind of on a daily basis and how they need to be supported. And that the compensation should reflect, kind of those things. Third is consistency. We want the experience that you have in Mumbai should be the experience that you have, kind of in New York or Washington or San Francisco or Chicago, kind of, or Europe, anywhere in Europe, et cetera. That's a super high standard. And I think there are only two firms that have successfully done that in our business, broadly defined. Carlyle is one and Goldman is the other. So aspiring to those two and trying to be able to create teams from getting a phone call anywhere in the world to look at a problem and try and figure out how to handle it. We're doing it now, but we need to do it consistently. So that consistency of experience. The last one, it's subject to interpretation, but I think it's important. And that is, we should be doing transactions of consequence in the sectors that we operate in. And what I mean by consequence is in any one of the 11 industries, kind of that we focus on and have developed, kind of expertise, we should be doing things that matter in that space, that people will sit up and take notice of, that will understand, wow, that's pretty special. I need to learn about that as quickly as I can. That is the virtual flywheel for our business, because success and momentum in our business creates the next client. You have nanoseconds after you completed something successfully to broadcast the what should you know about it and what does it mean to you, Mr. Competitor. And by virtue of their interest, you know you have a potential client. And you have a set of knowledge that virtually nobody else has, including the other advisor that represented whoever the counterparty was. And we want to do that consistently between $75 million of enterprise value and $1 billion all day long. That is how we will measure our success as a global mid-market firm. Sure, we'll go up, we can go down, it doesn't matter, but 75 to a billion, velocity in that category, that's how we'll become a top 5 player. And what do we need to do? We need to just turn up and accelerate the velocity around that. In order to get to where we want to be, we need, if we do 200 transactions a year, we need to do 400 transactions, 500 transactions. 600 would make us a market leader, right? So somewhere in there, there's an accelerant. Mm-hmm. And what are they? It's being global. It's operating in 21 markets around the world with hyper-local capabilities that have access and insight into everyone in those markets. We have sector expertise that travels the globe, that allows people to win in any market. Domain expertise combined with relationship is the winner. Relationship alone is a loser in this day and age. So we need to combine. That's why we need to collaborate. That's why we need to communicate. That's why we need to turn up our game. And by virtue of doing that, what happens? One, there's a ton of momentum in the business. Two, everyone gets treated well and has tremendous experiences because we need to leverage and stretch talent. It's only in slow places, slow times, that there isn't the same experience that we want to create culturally, kind of for folks. This notion of it's an apprenticeship, but you're dealing with established practitioners where everyone can teach you something, right? The worst person that you're going to work with, you can still learn something from. That doesn't mean you have to go back for a second time, but constantly learn and build that skill set. It's a great thing. What else can I tell you?
I agree with a lot of it, and I can feel your drive, your ambition. There's clearly some ambitious plans, and it's great to see, and I connect with it. Communication, team, consistency, transactions of consequence. I mean, these are great pillars, obviously, to build on. So thanks for sharing them.
But they're themes that help align with that culture, right? We have an entrepreneurial culture on the one hand. People want to make a difference, right? They're here to make a difference. And we need to put them in situations that allow them to do that internally, externally, and just one of the things that the partnership model we've lost is, sure, there are economics and everyone's going to do very well in this business, but there's also non-monetary compensation by virtue of the experiences, the mentorship, the quality of engagement with clients, all of those other things, our team has to ask their friends at other places, how are those other things, right? And what they'll find is it's not the same thing everywhere, right? So I hope that helps.
It does. And the consistency is a challenge, and we're operating across the globe as well, not on the same level as DC Advisory, and it's tough to drive that consistent, you say. You really have to work at it, so appreciate that. What about investment banking culture? In terms of, the investment banking industry is extremely demanding, we know that. How do you balance a great culture with the demands of the industry and your clients?
So I guess I start with no one is going to get around the fact that this is a 24/7 job, kind of at some level. But we do have to get past, in my day, the motivating factor was there were 10 other people that wanted your job. So you had the fear of God as, kind of a motivator to you. We have to stop that, right? That's not, kind of what it is. And the pandemic taught us that people can be highly productive anywhere. Some would say they're more productive, kind of not being physical. But not being physical, the cost is cultural glue, right? Missing elements to that mentorship, being present, being able to go into an office and listen to a senior banker's call with a client, how they handle it. All of those subtle things you lose if you're not there. So I think what we have to do is remind ourselves that we should never go backwards. We need to move forward. And we need to think about what are the things that we learned through this pandemic that allowed us to be, quite frankly, productive and successful. And how do we apply them going forward, knowing that we need to address culture? That there are any number of people that we have all hired that we never physically met. We met them on Zoom. They were in their parents' basement for 2 years. So we need to adapt. And I guess culturally, I just believe we live in an Apple and Amazon world. And what that means is every day you have to be better than yesterday. You need to change, you need to adapt, you need to try and figure out other technique to improve, or you are falling behind. If you keep that mindset and you offer that, kind of to people up and down the spectrum, good things happen. And I guess what I would say at its core, we need people to believe they're working in a firm that is trying to do something special, that can make a difference in a lot of different ways, not just with clients, but from a societal perspective. How do you give back? What do you give back, kind of to? My passion is education, needless to say, because it's like the enabler for all of us. But we need to realize we're part of something larger than ourselves and embrace it and lead, kind of with that. And it helps reinforce all of the other, kind of narratives of my 4 C's. And I think ultimately that is, kind of the culture. And I think it's what works.
Yeah, I think you touched on a few things. It is about being better. That's that Amazon mindset, maybe used there, improving, getting better. And it is a challenge not having everyone able to have those instant learning moments you mentioned as well. I've seen that a lot, but I like the sentiments you shared. I know DC Advisory is big on sustainability, and I know you've pledged to support the UN SDGs. Mm-hmm. What benefits are you seeing from action on sustainability? So I always try and encourage walking the talk. And what I mean by that is tons of people talk about this, kind of it's in their annual report, but it's just words. And so for us, diversity, it's a big deal. You heard me talk about it before. But I'm going to use a couple of examples that I think are important. The biggest opportunity for all of us, and I mean all of us in this industry, is to recruit back to it the women who left the job market when they had children. Incredibly talented, I don't want to say silent workforce, but a workforce that needs to be enabled and brought back into it in a meaningful way. We've done all kinds of trials, kind of in issues, and oftentimes success or failure around this particular initiative has to do with their own egos about can they juggle
Or are they doing enough for the client? Or are they being visible enough? But in the pandemic world, they can be visible in lots of different ways, right? And so I think that is singularly the biggest initiative we should all have and embrace and really deliver against, because coming out of school, what we know is it's a 50-50 mix of male-female. Actually, it may be slightly larger female than male, and yet our business is not that. And that's a shame. And if it's not on the front end, it certainly is not going to be that later, kind of in life. And so we need to figure out ways of how do we supplement it and build it over time. So I use that, kind of as one example. Second, kind of we've got, kind of a whole set, kind of initiatives around sustainability. Whether it's, the German engineer says only those things that you measure can you improve, right? So carbon footprint, every office, we measure everything. We're now certified by Green Planet, Planet Green something, kind of around, kind of our carbon footprint. DC Advisory, we could be carbon neutral for like $10,000, or maybe it's 10,000 pounds. I mean, it's nothing. But quite frankly, if we just paid for it, we wouldn't work to continue to reduce it. So our goal is to continue to drive this down in terms of actions that everyone could take. Planting trees, kind of in success, kind of transactions for clients. Awesome. And I'd love us to do it in more metropolitan areas around where clients, kind of are. Sustainable tombstones, kind of as you know. Digital transformation in our work and our work product. I mean, and I joke and I say that the average presentation that we do for a client, average, takes 50 iterations. How many of those iterations are physical printing? To how many on a deal team? As opposed to just digital. We have the most digitally native young folks. We don't have digitally native older folks. Helping with that transition, quite frankly, upskilling senior people to do the right thing. All part of what we're trying to do as part of transformation. And as you're doing it, and we're not an accounting firm and we haven't templated everything, and we will never do that. Because at its core, we talk about being entrepreneurial, but ultimately, why we're successful is because we're creative. If you looked at the 40 managing directors and directors in the United States, no two presentations would look alike. That's a positive and a negative. Back to my hyper-local, my creativity, speak to the client and think about what they need or want. But that also, that juxtaposes against scaling. If you can't systematize some of the processes, and I mean the processes behind the scenes, those can be systematized. The client-facing things, kind of can't be in the same way. But all of those are just little examples of what it is we're trying to do from an SDG perspective. And then I would say, last but not least, the most important thing we've learned that we need to be mindful of is well-being of our team. This was horrible going through the pandemic. Having young folks feel like they were chained to their desk 24/7. They couldn't go and get food. They couldn't go and get their laundry taken care of or whatever because they were waiting for a call late at night. Well, we've tried to set in place protocols, kind of to be able to deal with client behavior or, team behavior, to give people space to allow themselves to do, kind of what it is they do. There are other things that we can do in terms of services, healthcare, mental health, kind of et cetera, to allow, kind of access and encourage. How about exercise, promotion, health, et cetera? So complicated topic, but one that we're really listening and paying attention to what people need. And it starts and ends with, you need time, take it, right? You're not going to be productive if you're preoccupied, period. And what's so funny is most young people don't know that they can really say that, or they're fearful of it. They don't know how it will be taken. And it's just got to become routine, because that's what, kind of as leaders, we've heard we need to do differently in order to make sure that we can maintain team and team productivity. So, helpful?
For sure. So much in that resonates with me, and of course, having more females within the business and higher levels of leadership. I recently had an inspirational female leader on the podcast series, and she shared a lot about flexibility being key and asking the female leaders what they can and can't do rather than assuming. There was a lot of good stuff in that interview which she shared. And I know not buying credits but going the hard yards on ESG resonates a lot with me. As your main partner in this area, it's something that we really focus on as well. And it's not about buying, it's about the behavioural changes that make the difference. And I couldn't agree more about team well-being, really creating those spaces.
But what's interesting is, I would say there is much more focus on this topic in Europe than there is in the US. It's coming here. But our younger populations are totally into it. And if we're not doing things about these topics, we'll lose them.
Sure.
And we can't. We can't afford to from a talent perspective, and we can't afford to from a societal perspective. It's back to, we're doing something larger than ourselves with purpose. So do it as opposed to talk about it.
Couldn't agree more. Well said. And shout out to Helen Drury and the team there, who I know are working really hard, particularly on that ESG area.
Helen's awesome.
Yeah. I can't believe it, but we're reaching the end of the show. So I guess I'm going to start the wrap. For those listening who want to get more of you, how do they best connect, Scott?
Scott.Wieler, dcadvisory.com. Easy to do. I will try and listen to commentary along the way. and obviously LinkedIn, I'm very engaged there. So I want to say thank you. It's been fun, and you've made me think about some things that I probably haven't reflected on in a long time. But mentorship, it evolves and it changes. And everyone just needs to stay true to that, building a network of influencers. And I don't mean influencers in the social media sense, but I mean people that you can listen to that are thoughtful. Last thing I would say, and I know this is dinosaur days, but before I started in the business, I was a voracious reader. And the analogy I would use today is, my wife laughs when I spend 15 minutes watching Fox News and MSNBC. And I do both because I want to understand the polemic debate of the day. And there's no way better to get those elements than all on all the time. But what we forget is the 60% of the world that is semi-normal, that is mainstream, that, quite frankly, still believes we're going in the wrong direction. But it's, how do you speak to those people and listen, right? Because, that's the opportunity to continue to move forward.
Is there a particular book or materials that you recommend that have had a really big impact on you and your growth as a leader?
I think we all have the how-to books. They're for what it's worth. I would tell you the most important thing I try and do when I read is decompress. It's actually get away from all of it and, kind of just immerse myself in something that's interesting, amusing, kind of exciting. That's what I try and do. But if you want one, read Dan Brown and Origin.
Dan Brown, Origin.
It was nothing like I expected and was truly interesting around science and the church and the conflicts between the two over time. And again, fanciful, fictitious, but it's pretty interesting stuff.
We'll get it in the show notes for the listeners. And, great conversation, Scott. I mean, I've really enjoyed it. So thanks for your insight. Thanks for your time. I appreciate how busy your schedule is. And I'm really excited to listen to it back, think about what you've shared. I'm sure the listeners will have taken heaps away to help them on their journey. So big thanks, and thanks for joining me.
Well, I think the editing will be better than the raw footage, but thank you for doing it. And it was fun.
Thanks so much, Scott.
All the best.
Take care. Thanks for joining me today for the Investment Banking Leaders podcast. Today's episode was brought to you by Altrum, the global leaders in commemorating your most important transactions with a meaningful deal toy. So if you have a successful deal to celebrate, hit me up or the Altrum team at altrum.com to get your design started. I really enjoyed the conversation with Scott. His longevity, his ability to tell a story, success within the industry made for really compelling listening, and I really enjoyed it, and I hope you did too. For me, there were many standout parts, but the keys to succeeding he shared, and there were many of them. There was listen intently, be a sponge, be tenacious, go beyond the single task and be really curious. He talked about mentorship and the importance of that to succeeding. His take on client satisfaction and client loyalty and how it needs to be earned every day. It's not because you've closed one deal that you earn it. It needs to be continually learned. He talked a lot about role transitions, how they're all tough, how important it is for you to really have built the experiences before you take the step up to the next role, and how that also helps you build what he called the judgment bank, which is not only key for success in the role, but key to advising your clients as well. He talked a lot about that VP to MD transition and how it's the toughest one, and how becoming a marketer on top of being good at execution is a different skill to build. And he shared, involve seniors, involve chairmen, garner their support and their advice, and it will help you to make that step easier. A lot on the 4 C's, as he called them: communication, consistency, collaboration, and consequence. And he shared how these were key to DC Advisory's culture and also their growth aspirations. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the episode, and join me again for another discussion with a successful investment banking leader. As always, you can find us where great podcasts live. Follow our podcast page, share it with all those who may be interested, and until next time, best of luck with your transactions.